Snow fell like soft white feathers, covering the forest in a quiet, frozen blanket. The trees stood tall and silent, their branches heavy with frost, creaking under the weight of the winter night. In the middle of this vast wilderness, a small wooden cabin stood alone, smoke curling from its crooked chimney. Inside, Era sat by the fire, her hands wrapped around a mug of steaming herbal tea. The warmth of the cabin was a comfort, but it did little to ease the loneliness that had been her companion for many years. Era was no ordinary woman. She was an Omega, someone considered small and unremarkable in the eyes of the supernatural world. Yet she possessed a quiet strength, a courage that came not from force, but from kindness and resilience. She had chosen this remote life to escape the politics of kings, the whispers of the Lycan clans, and the dangers that came with them. Here, she believed, she could live in peace. But peace was fragile, especially in a world where the cold could be as lethal as a predator, and where the forest itself seemed to breathe with secrets. That night, a sound broke the silence, a soft, pained whine, almost drowned out by the wind. Era's heart tightened. She rose, carefully lifting the wooden latch of her door. The wind bit at her face, cold and sharp, but her eyes immediately found the source of the sound. Lying in the snow, trembling and half buried in white, were 25 wolves. Their fur was matted with ice, their eyes wide with fear and pain. They were young, old, some barely more than pups, but all were suffering. A strange, magnetic energy radiated from them, different from ordinary wolves. Era could sense intelligence, almost human understanding, in their gaze. Her heart ached. She had heard stories of the Lycan clans, the supernatural wolves who served kings and queens, feared and respected. To aid them was dangerous. Some might call it an act of rebellion, but she could not leave them to die in the cold. Compassion guided her steps as she opened the cabin door wider, allowing the cold wind to slip past her. One by one, she coaxed them inside, murmuring soothing words. The warmth of the cabin seemed almost magical against their frozen bodies. She wrapped them in blankets, fed them small pieces of dried meat, and offered them water. The wolves' breathing gradually slowed. Some curled up by the fire, exhausted but safe. Among them was one that caught her attention, a large, dark-furred wolf with piercing amber eyes. Unlike the others, he did not fully relax. He watched her constantly, his gaze sharp, as if measuring her worth. Era knelt near him, extending a hand slowly. He sniffed it, his breath misting in the cold air, then finally lowered his head in a cautious gesture of trust. Hours passed in silence, broken only by the soft crackling of the fire. Era moved carefully, attending to the wolves, murmuring to them as if they could understand every word. In return, she felt a strange sense of connection, a pull she could not explain. The night deepened, and with it, a feeling of something watching beyond the cabin walls. Then came the howl. It started low, almost mournful, and grew into a deep, echoing call that seemed to shake the trees themselves. Every wolf in the cabin lifted its head, ears pricked, eyes wide. Era's heart thudded in her chest. She had never heard a sound like this, strong, commanding, and filled with a strange authority. The howl carried a warning, a claim, and a question all at once. Era stepped to the window and looked out. The snow-covered forest was silent, but she could sense movement. Shadows shifted among the trees. Hooves struck the frozen ground. Boots crunched against snow. Something large approached. She drew back from the window, her pulse racing. The wolves stirred, low growls vibrating in their throats. The large, dark-furred wolf that had been cautious before now bared his teeth slightly, standing protectively in front of the others. Era's hands trembled, but she forced herself to stay calm. Panic would not save them. Hours passed, or perhaps minutes, it was hard to tell in the darkness. Outside, the sounds grew louder. The rhythm of many boots, the clatter of weapons, the low, commanding growls of creatures larger than any wolf she had ever known. The forest seemed alive with tension, a storm of energy moving toward her cabin. Era realized she was no longer just a woman in a quiet valley. She was at the center of something far bigger than herself, something ancient and dangerous. She did not yet understand the rules of this world, but she knew the forest had led these wolves to her for a reason. The wolves circled her, their bodies pressing close. She could feel their warmth, their trust, and their fear. She whispered to them, "Stay close. We will face this together." She did not know if the words were for them or for herself. Courage was not the absence of fear, it was moving forward despite it. Suddenly, the largest shadow appeared at the edge of the clearing. A figure mounted on a massive black steed emerged, armor glinting faintly under the pale moonlight. The aura of authority and danger radiated from him, and even from this distance, Era could feel it pressing against her chest. The wolves stiffened, growling softly, tails low but rigid. Era's stomach tightened. This was no ordinary hunter. This was a leader, a king among the Lycans. The Lycan king. Her mind raced. She had heard stories. How his army swept across lands. How no one could defy him and live. How his eyes could see through the lies and weakness of any who dared stand before him. And now, he was coming to her doorstep. The figure dismounted, moving with a grace and precision that seemed unnatural, almost regal. Each step toward the cabin left prints in the snow that seemed to shimmer slightly, as though the cold itself feared him. Era's hand hovered over the door latch. She knew leaving was impossible. There was nowhere to run. The forest stretched for miles, and the snow would betray every step. Her only choice was to face him and the army that followed him. She looked at the wolves. Their trust, their lives, had become entwined with her own. She could not abandon them, and yet, she understood that the consequences of sheltering them could be far worse than the biting cold of the night. The heavy silence of the forest was broken again by a distant but unmistakable sound. A deep, commanding growl, almost like a voice, rolling across the snow and echoing through the trees. It was a warning, a question, and a challenge all at once. Era's breath fogged in the icy air. She felt the pull of destiny, a thread stretching from her heart to the unknown figure approaching. Courage surged through her, not the kind born from strength, but the kind born from necessity, from love, and from defiance. She would face whatever came, not just for herself, but for those who could not defend themselves. Then the first soldier appeared at the tree line, followed by another, and then another, until the forest seemed alive with movement. Hooves, boots, and armor clattered over the snow. The wolves growled, a warning that carried the weight of centuries. But Ira stood firm. The firelight inside the cabin flickered, illuminating her pale face, her wide, determined eyes. She whispered softly, more to herself than to the wolves, "We cannot let fear rule us. Not tonight. Not ever." Woo! From the shadows, the massive figure of the Lycan king stepped closer, his eyes like molten gold, burning with authority and curiosity. The night held its breath. Era tightened her grip on the wolf that had trusted her first, feeling the heartbeat beneath its fur, matching her own. She had taken a risk, defied the cold and the world, and now she would see what fate had in store for her. Outside, the wind carried the faint echo of a single, chilling word, unspoken but understood: defiance. And in that instant, Era knew that her quiet life, her solitude, and her carefully hidden strength were about to collide with a power she could not yet comprehend. The wolves stirred at her side, the firelight glinting in their eyes, and the snow-covered forest waited, holding secrets that only tomorrow would reveal. The morning light barely pierced the heavy gray clouds, casting a dim glow over the snow-covered valley. The cabin, once a haven of quiet warmth, now felt small and fragile under the vast, watchful sky. Era stood at the door, her breath visible in the freezing air, eyes scanning the line of figures that stretched across the clearing. The Lycan king's army had arrived. Rows of soldiers, clad in dark leather and silver, stood silent, boots crunching against the snow. Their eyes gleamed like shards of gold, reflecting the cold light and the unnatural power that radiated from their leader. Era's heart thudded in her chest. She had known there would be consequences for sheltering the wolves, but nothing in the tales she had heard prepared her for this presence. At the center, a massive figure dismounted from a black steed, armor glinting despite the muted morning light. Kalen, the Lycan king, moved with a regal precision that made the air itself seem to bend around him. His eyes, molten gold and unnervingly sharp, scanned the cabin and the wolves inside. Era felt a shiver that was not entirely caused by the cold. There was something magnetic about him, a power that demanded attention, respect, and fear all at once. Yet behind the commanding presence, she sensed a restraint, a calculation that made his intentions uncertain. Kalen stopped a few steps from the cabin, his gaze fixed on her. "You've sheltered them," he said, his voice low and rich, echoing slightly in the quiet morning. "Do you understand what you have done?" Era's hands clenched the wooden doorframe, knuckles white. She met his gaze steadily. "They were freezing," she said simply. "They needed help. I couldn't leave them to die." A ripple passed through the soldiers behind him, a mixture of surprise and tension. Some murmured among themselves, their growls barely contained. But Kalen's eyes never left hers. There was a flicker of something unreadable: anger, curiosity, perhaps even admiration. "You are an Omega," Kalen said, his voice softer now, but no less commanding. "Your kind is not meant to interfere in the affairs of the Lycan clans. You risked your life, and theirs, by defying the laws of the kingdom." Era swallowed, her voice steady despite the fear fluttering in her chest. "I did what I thought was right. That is all." Kalen's gaze sharpened, and for a moment, Era thought she might feel the full force of his wrath. But then he did something unexpected. He tilted his head, as if studying a curious animal, and a slow, deliberate smile brushed his lips. "Bold," he said, almost to himself. "Defiance, or courage? Perhaps both." The wolves inside the cabin stirred, some growling softly, others pressing closer to her side. They seemed to sense the tension between her and the king, their instincts warning of danger and judgment. The largest wolf, the one with amber eyes, stepped forward slightly. Chest low, muscles tensed, Era placed a gentle hand on its fur. "You will not harm them," she said, meeting Kalen's gaze without flinching. "I will not allow it." Kalen's eyes narrowed slightly. "You speak with strength for someone so small." He stepped closer, each movement deliberate, his boots leaving prints in the snow that seemed to glow faintly. Most would have begged for mercy by now. Most would have hidden, trembling. Era did not move. She felt fear. Yes, but also something else. A strange, electric connection that she could not explain. His presence was overwhelming, but it stirred something inside her. A mixture of respect, fascination, and longing. She shook her head slightly, trying to push the thought away. She needed to survive. To protect the wolves, not to be distracted by the king's gaze. The soldiers shifted behind him, restless, sensing the unusual bond forming in the frozen clearing. One of them stepped forward, a young warrior with wary eyes, but Kalen raised a hand. "Do not touch her," he commanded. "Not yet." "Halen, Kama. Kama." Era's pulse quickened. Why had he spared her? Why had he not punished her for defying him? She did not understand, but she knew the answer was tied to the wolf at her side, and something far deeper, something she could not yet see. Kalen circled the cabin slowly, his gaze sweeping over the wolves, noting the careful way she had tended them. "These creatures," he said finally, his tone both curious and cautious. Era looked at him, her voice calm but firm. "Because they were in pain. Because they could not help themselves. And because I do not believe that power alone should decide life and death." A long silence followed. The wind whispered through the trees, and the snow seemed to pause in midair, waiting. Kalen's expression softened, though his eyes remained sharp and assessing. There was something in her words, something in her courage, that stirred a long-buried part of him, a part unused to honesty, unused to compassion. "You speak as if you understand the laws of this world," he said, almost wistfully. "Yet you are not bound by them. Most who defy the kingdom's rules pay a high price." Era met his gaze evenly. "Then I will accept whatever comes. But the wolves," she gestured to the animals now huddled together, "they do not deserve punishment. They are innocent." Kalen studied her for a long moment, then finally stepped back. "You have spirit," he said, his voice low, almost a whisper. "I cannot allow you to remain here alone. Not while the kingdom watches, and not while these wolves are involved. You will come with me to the palace." Ira's stomach tightened. The palace, a place she had only heard of in fearful whispers, a place where the Lycan king ruled with iron and shadow, where secrets and power intertwined. To go there was to step into a world of danger, politics, and magic far beyond her understanding. I cannot leave them," she said, her voice barely audible. Kalen's expression hardened. "Then you will face the consequences. And make no mistake, Omega Defiance has a price." The largest wolf growled again, low and menacing. Era put her hand on its head, murmuring softly. She knew the creature would follow her, as would the others, if she commanded them with trust and care. Kalen's gaze softened for the briefest moment, and then he gave a nod. "You will have the choice to prove your loyalty," he said. "One chance. Fail, and you will regret it." The soldiers shifted, the tension in the air almost tangible. Era could feel the weight of hundreds of eyes on her, the frost on the ground beneath her, and the strange pull between her and the king. She took a deep breath. Courage was not the absence of fear, it was moving forward despite it. "I will go," she said quietly, but firmly. "But know this, I will not betray those who trust me." Kalen's eyes softened slightly, as if acknowledging her resolve. "Good," he said. "Then we leave at once. The kingdom awaits, and your actions will be watched closely." Era gathered what she could carry, wrapping blankets around the wolves that would follow her. She looked one last time at the cabin, the quiet refuge that had sheltered her through so many lonely nights. Then, with a final glance at the forest, she stepped forward, joining the king and his army. The wolves moved with her, their paws silent against the snow, eyes bright and alert. The wind howled through the trees, carrying the echo of distant mountains and hidden dangers. Each step toward the palace felt heavier, the weight of destiny pressing against her heart. Kalen walked beside her, silent now, but his presence a constant force at her side. Era felt the pull again, an unspoken tension between them. Anger, respect, curiosity, and something she could not yet name. She forced herself to focus. The journey ahead would be dangerous. She would need courage, wit, and strength she did not yet know she possessed. The forest began to thin, and the distant spires of the Lycan palace glimmered faintly against the horizon. Smoke rose from chimneys, and the faint sound of voices carried through the cold air. Era's heart raced. She had entered a world she did not fully understand. And yet, she could not turn back. Her thoughts drifted to the wolves, to the king, and to the path she had chosen. The snow beneath her boots seemed to whisper, almost warning her, almost guiding her. The air was thick with expectation, with tension, with the promise of trials yet to come. And then, just as the first rays of light touched the icy towers of the palace, a low, rumbling growl rolled through the air. Faint at first, then stronger, almost like a warning. The wolves stiffened, ears pricked. Ira's pulse quickened. She looked up at Kalen. His eyes, golden and unreadable, met hers, and for the first time, she saw a flicker of uncertainty there. Something had been awakened. Something old. Something powerful. Something that neither of them fully understood yet. Cliffhanger. The army reached the gates of the palace, but the rumbling growl continued. echoing across the snow. Era felt it in her bones. The palace was not empty, and the trials awaiting her were far greater than she could have imagined. Kalen's jaw tightened, and he whispered, almost to himself, "The prophecy is stirring, and it begins with her." The palace rose from the snowy horizon like a mountain carved from black stone, its spires piercing the gray sky. Mist curled around the towers and draped the courtyard in a ghostly veil. Era felt her breath catch as the massive gates swung open, revealing soldiers and servants alike, all moving with precision and silent efficiency. She had entered a world far beyond the quiet cabin she once called home. Kalen led her through the icy corridors, his presence a constant, magnetic force. The walls were adorned with tapestries depicting battles, ancient rites, and the ancestors of the Lycan kingdom. Each step echoed, a reminder of the power and history that surrounded her. Ira's pulse quickened. She had heard tales of the palace, stories of loyalty, treachery, and magic, but nothing could have prepared her for the reality. The wolves moved silently behind her, their paws soundless on the polished stone floors. The largest wolf, amber-eyed and commanding, seemed to understand the unspoken rules, weaving between Era and Kalen, as though guarding both. "This place," Era murmured, her voice barely above a whisper. "It's immense." Kalen glanced at her, his golden eyes unreadable. "It is my domain, and everything within it is bound by the laws of the kingdom. You will learn them quickly, or suffer the consequences." Era nodded, trying to steady her nerves. She had faced danger in the forest, but this was different. Here, every shadow could hide an enemy. Every whisper could carry betrayal. And yet, a strange thrill ran through her veins. Courage was not born in safety. It was forged in trials. The corridors opened into a vast hall, the ceiling high above, lost in shadow. Silver chandeliers glinted faintly, and the walls were lined with statues of Lycans in human and wolf forms, frozen in moments of honor and battle. Soldiers moved like shadows, observing Ira with curiosity and caution. Whispers followed her steps, quiet murmurs of surprise at her boldness, at her audacity to enter the palace unarmed and unafraid. Kalen stopped before a pair of double doors. He placed a hand on the smooth black wood, and the doors swung open to reveal the inner sanctum of the palace, a room of stone, silver, and flickering torchlight. The air smelled of incense and something metallic, sharp and old. "You will remain here for now," Kalen said. His tone softened, but his eyes remained vigilant. "The court will see you. The wolves will be taken to a secure area. They are not to be harmed, but they must be observed." Era's stomach tightened. She nodded, watching as the soldiers gently guided the wolves away. The largest one paused, turning its head to meet her eyes. Era whispered, "Be brave. I'll return soon." The wolf let out a low, almost approving growl before following the others. Alone now, she felt the weight of the palace pressing in. Every shadow seemed to watch her. Every flicker of torchlight seemed alive. Kalen stepped closer, his presence undeniable, and she felt the tension coil between them. "You are brave," he said, his voice low and measured. "Or perhaps foolish. Most would have cowered at the gates. But you did not. That is unusual for an Omega." Era met his gaze steadily. "I am not afraid of what is right, only what is wrong." Kalen's eyes softened slightly, though a shadow of something older and darker lingered behind them. "Courage alone will not keep you alive here," he said. "You will need wit, strength, and understanding. You will need to navigate the loyalties and rivalries that run through this palace, like veins of ice." Era swallowed. "I will do my best." The silence stretched between them, thick with unspoken tension. She felt the pull again, that strange connection that had begun in the forest. There was respect, yes, but also curiosity, and something deeper, almost electric in its intensity. Kalen's gaze lingered on her longer than necessary, and Era felt her pulse quicken. Before she could dwell further, the doors opened again, and a courtier entered, bowing deeply. "Your Majesty," the man said, addressing Kalen, "the council waits." and the matter of the wolves is of immediate concern. Kalen's eyes flicked to Era. This will not be easy, he said quietly. Do you understand? Era nodded. She did not fully understand what lay ahead, but she knew she could not back down. She had saved the wolves, and now she must face whatever consequences awaited her. The council chamber was vast, filled with Lycans of all ranks, their forms shifting subtly between human and wolf features. They regarded her with a mixture of suspicion and intrigue. Era's heart raced, but she held her head high, letting the calm she had cultivated in the forest guide her. One of the counselors, a tall, silver-furred Lycan, stepped forward. An Omega in the palace is unusual, he said, his voice tinged with disbelief, and sheltering our kind, unusual beyond measure. Explain yourself, woman. Era took a deep breath. They were in need, she said simply. They were suffering, and I could not let them die. That is all I have to say. Murmurs rippled through the chamber. Some were skeptical, some curious, some clearly angry. Kalen's eyes swept over the council, commanding silence. Let her speak, he said, his voice like thunder and silk at once. She acted with intent, not malice, and for that, she will have the chance to prove herself. Era felt a flicker of hope. She had feared anger, punishment, perhaps exile or worse. But Kalen's protection, though fragile and uncertain, offered a lifeline. She would have to earn her place, navigate the politics and intrigue of the court, and show that her courage was not a fleeting spark, but a steady flame. As the council debated her fate, Era noticed subtle gestures, the way some Lycans avoided her gaze, the way others studied her with careful calculation. She realized that every movement, every word here carried weight. A misstep could cost her not only her safety but the wolves' lives and perhaps her own soul. Later, Kalen escorted her to a private chamber. The room was sparse, yet elegant, with frost patterns etched on the windows by the cold night air. The fire burned low, casting flickering shadows across the walls. You have done well to survive the council, Kalen said, standing by the window, but this is only the beginning. The palace holds dangers unseen, and loyalties are fragile. You must be careful whom you trust. Era nodded. I will be careful. I do not intend to fail. Kalen's gaze lingered on her, sharp and unyielding. I will watch you, he said softly. Do not mistake my attention for leniency. You may survive this, or you may not. The choice will be yours at every turn. There was a silence between them, heavy and charged. Era felt the pull again. That strange energy that seemed to bridge the gap between fear and fascination, respect, and something deeper she could not yet name. Night fell over the palace, and Era remained awake, listening to the faint sounds of the corridors, the shifting of armor, the distant howls of wolves, the whisper of wind through the towers. She thought of the wolves she had saved, wondering how they fared in the secure chambers, and of Kalen, the Lycan king whose presence filled every corner of the palace, even when he was silent. Her mind wandered to the prophecy she had only glimpsed through whispers in the forest, the warning that an Omega would awaken forces long forgotten. She did not yet understand her part in it, but a sense of purpose stirred within her. A quiet determination to face whatever trials lay ahead. A faint howl echoed through the night, low and warning, and Era's heart quickened. The palace was alive with power and secrets, and she was at its center now. She knew that tomorrow would bring new challenges, tests of loyalty, courage, and perhaps even the first true understanding of her connection to Kalen and the wolves. As sleep finally claimed her, Era dreamed of shadows and gold eyes, of wolves running through endless snow, and of a hand reaching for hers across a void of ice and fire. Cliffhanger. When morning came, a sudden alarm echoed through the palace, a deep, reverberating sound that shook the stone walls. Era awoke to see Kalen's face tense, his golden eyes sharp with concern. Through the frost-streaked window, a distant shape moved, an unknown force approaching the palace, powerful and relentless. Era's heart pounded. The trials were only beginning, and the world outside the walls was far more dangerous than she had imagined. The alarm echoed through the palace, shaking the tall black towers with its deep, resonant call. Era's heart pounded as she rose from her bed, her breath misting in the cold morning air. Outside the frost-covered windows, the distant shapes of moving figures flickered through the haze. Something powerful approached, an unknown force, relentless and determined. Kalen stood by the window, his golden eyes narrowed and sharp. His presence radiated authority and strength. Yet beneath it, Era sensed something more, an unease he rarely allowed others to see. "They are coming," he said quietly. "The prophecy stirs, and the forces it foretold have begun to awaken." Era's pulse quickened, but fear did not dominate her. She thought of the wolves she had saved, of the courage that had brought her to the palace, and of the strange, unshakable bond she felt with the Lycan king. Courage, she reminded herself, was not the absence of fear but the choice to move forward despite it. The palace gates opened, and Kalen moved swiftly, his armor glinting in the weak light as he summoned the soldiers. Era followed, her steps silent on the icy stone. Her mind focused and alert, she knew that her decisions in the coming hours could shape not only her fate, but the lives of the wolves, the kingdom, and perhaps even Kalen himself. As they reached the courtyard, the unknown force revealed itself, a band of dark, shadowed figures, moving with unnatural speed. Eyes glowing with a strange, cold fire. The soldiers tensed, claws and weapons ready, while Era's eyes widened at the sight. These were no ordinary enemies. They were creatures of darkness, bound by ancient magic, and drawn toward the palace by the same prophecy that had brought her here. Kalen's voice cut through the tension like steel. "Stand firm," he commanded. "Do not falter. Protect the palace and all within it, and stay close to her." Era felt the pull again, that magnetic energy between herself and Kalen. She did not fully understand it, but she trusted him instinctively. Together, they moved through the ranks, preparing defenses and guiding soldiers, each step measured, each command clear. The wolves, released from their secure chambers, ran alongside her, their forms shifting subtly between human and wolf traits. They were no longer merely animals, they were guardians, bound to her by trust and courage. The largest wolf, amber-eyed and imposing, stayed at her side, muscles coiled, ready to protect her with every ounce of strength. The first clash came swiftly. Shadows lunged from the trees at the edge of the courtyard, moving like living darkness. Soldiers met them with steel and magic, but the creatures were fast and clever, striking with coordinated precision. Era acted instinctively, moving with the wolves, guiding them to flank the shadows, using her knowledge of the forest and strategy to outmaneuver the attackers. Kalen fought beside her, every motion precise and deadly. His presence was both terrifying and awe-inspiring, a force of nature that seemed impossible to resist. Yet even amidst the chaos, he never left her side, eyes flicking to hers with concern and unspoken acknowledgement. Hours passed in a blur of battle, the courtyard echoing with the clash of claws, steel, and the roars of the Lycans. Era felt herself growing stronger with each passing moment, her courage solidifying, her bond with the wolves deepening. She realized that she had become part of something far greater than herself, a force capable of shaping the fate of the kingdom. Finally, the shadowed figures began to retreat, their numbers thinning as the Lycan forces held firm. The courtyard was scarred and battered, but the palace stood, and Era, Kalen, and the wolves had endured. Breathing heavily, Era stepped back, her gaze meeting Kalen's. The intensity between them had grown through the battle, not fear, not anger, but a mutual respect and unspoken understanding. For the first time, she saw a flicker of vulnerability in his golden eyes, a hint of the burden he carried as king and as a creature bound by prophecy. "You were magnificent," Kalen said, his voice low but carrying weight. "You did not falter, even when the shadows seemed endless." I underestimated you." Era shook her head, trying to hide her own exhaustion. "It was not just me," she said. "The wolves, the soldiers, you all fought together. Strength comes from more than one heart." Kalen studied her silently. the faintest trace of a smile brushing his lips. "You are extraordinary," he admitted, "more than I imagined." Perhaps the prophecy was right, after all. You are at its center. Not by chance, but by choice. The largest wolf stepped forward, pressing its head to Era's side, amber eyes meeting hers with loyalty and understanding. She felt a wave of emotion, pride, relief, and something deeper. A bond that surpassed words. These creatures trusted her, and in return, she trusted them. As night fell over the palace, the battle over but the tension lingering, Kaelin led her to the highest tower. The wind whipped around them, cold and biting, but the view of the snow-covered lands below was breathtaking. The kingdom stretched endlessly, mountains and forests merging in a panorama of white and silver. Era felt the pull again, that magnetic tension between her and Kaelin, stronger than ever in the quiet of the tower. "Why do you stay so close?" she asked softly, almost shyly, though her heart raced. Kaelin's gaze met hers, intense and unwavering. "Because I cannot afford not to," he said. "You are part of this kingdom now, part of its fate, and you are part of mine. Whether I wish it or not." Era felt a warmth that had nothing to do with the fire of the palace, something that stirred deep within her chest. She had faced fear, darkness, and power. And yet in this moment, with Kaelin beside her and the wolves loyal at her feet, she felt a strange peace. Perhaps courage and compassion could change even a world built on shadows and rules older than memory. The night passed with whispered plans and careful observation. Era and Kaelin spoke quietly of strategy, of loyalty, and of the prophecy. She learned more about his burden, the curse that had shaped him into the feared Lycan king, and the loneliness that came with his power. She understood now that his heart was not cold. It had been shielded by duty, by fear, and by centuries of isolation. Through shared trust and understanding, a bond began to form, not through obligation, but through choice. Era realized that the strength to face darkness did not lie solely in magic or power, but in compassion, courage, and the willingness to stand beside others, even when the outcome was uncertain. The wolves, now resting within the tower, shifted occasionally between their forms, a reminder of the strange, magical connection that tied them all together. Era stroked the largest wolf's fur, whispering softly, and felt a calm she had never known in the forest. She understood, finally, that her role in the prophecy was not merely to endure, but to unite, to lead with courage, and to inspire trust in those around her. As dawn approached, the first light touched the icy towers, scattering the shadows and revealing the extent of the battle's aftermath. Kaelin stood beside her, silent but vigilant, his hand brushing hers briefly, a subtle acknowledgement, yet one that carried the weight of unspoken promise. Era felt her heart swell with determination. The trials were not over, and the prophecy still held secrets she had yet to uncover. But she knew, in this moment, that courage and love were powerful forces. Together, she and Kaelin, along with the loyal wolves, could face whatever darkness lay ahead. Climactic resolution. In the following days, Era guided the wolves, healed the wounded, and strengthened the bond between the Lycan king and his subjects. Kaelin began to lower the barriers around his heart, showing moments of vulnerability and trust. Their connection deepened, a mixture of respect, fascination, and growing affection. The prophecy remained, its full meaning yet to unfold. But one truth became clear. The Omega had awakened forces long dormant, not only in the kingdom, but in the heart of the Lycan king himself. Together, they faced a new beginning, one shaped not by fear, but by courage, trust, and the quiet, unyielding power of compassion.